"You're my wife now," the little boy declared, his voice echoing through the marble hallway. "Wait, I mean, you're going to be my wife, Mississippi." He corrected himself quickly, like he was stating a fact rather than asking a question. Kimberly June was scrubbing the floor of Seoul's most exclusive corporate tower at 2 a.m., trying to stay invisible to the ghosts of her past, when a 6-year-old in a bright blue hoodie emerged from behind a marble pillar and called her his wife. She laughed softly, kneeling to his level. "If I'm your wife," she joked, "will you protect me from the bad guys?" His eyes lit up like fireworks. "Yes," he declared proudly. "My daddy can make anyone disappear. He's really, really powerful." Kimberly agreed on a whim, thinking it was nothing more than a lonely child's game, completely unaware that this single playful yes would pull her straight into the violent, glittering world of Korea's most feared mafia boss. And that the little boy's father was already watching from the shadows. Before we start, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who loves drama and romance. It truly means a lot to me seeing this community grow across the globe. Every like, comment, and share helps us bring more incredible stories to life, together. Now, let's dive in. Kimberly June had been working the graveyard shift in the Song Tower for 3 months, and in that time, she'd perfected the art of being invisible. Navy blue uniform pressed and spotless. Hair pulled into a neat, low bun. White cleaning cloth always in hand. She moved through the gold-lit hallways like a ghost, efficient, silent, unnoticed. That's exactly how she liked it. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant the people hunting her back in the States wouldn't find her. Invisible meant she could save enough money to disappear again, maybe to Japan this time, or Thailand, anywhere her past couldn't follow. Tonight, the 47th floor was supposed to be empty. The executive suites were always vacant after midnight, locked behind biometric security that Kimberly's janitorial clearance gave her access to. She'd been mopping the long corridor beneath the crystal chandeliers, their light casting fractured rainbows across the white marble, when she heard it. A soft, muffled sob. She froze, mop in hand, listening. The sound came again. A child crying. Kimberly set down her bucket and followed the sound to a marble pillar near the elevator bank. Crouched behind it, knees pulled to his chest, was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 years old. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and he wore a bright blue hoodie that looked expensive, too expensive for a kid to be wandering around alone at 2 in the morning. His face was buried in his hands, small shoulders shaking. "Hey there," Kimberly said gently, kneeling down so she was at his level. "You okay, sweetheart?" The boy's head jerked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, but when he saw her, they went wide with something that looked like wonder. "Wow," he breathed. "You look like a princess." Kimberly blinked, surprised into a soft laugh. A princess? In a janitor's uniform? She glanced down at her navy vest and white apron. "I think you might need glasses, little man." "You're my wife now," Sungmin declared suddenly, pointing at her with absolute certainty. Kimberly blinked, surprised into a soft laugh. "Your wife? In a janitor's uniform?" She glanced down at her navy vest and white apron. "I think you might need glasses, little man." "No," he insisted, shaking his head seriously. "Wives don't always wear fancy dresses. Sometimes they're disguised. Like in my storybooks. You're my wife because you're beautiful and kind." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "My name's Sungmin." "I'm Kimberly," she said, offering him a warm smile. "What are you doing up here all by yourself, Sungmin? Where are your parents?" His face fell. "Hiding from my daddy. He wants to take me to the doctor again." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I hate doctors. They poke me with needles and say scary things about my heart." Kimberly's chest tightened with sympathy. So young, and already dealing with something serious. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. That sounds really hard." What about you? Sungmin asked, tilting his head. Why are you working so late? Are you hiding too? The question caught her off guard. This kid was sharper than he looked. Yeah, Kimberly admitted quietly. I guess I am. I'm hiding from some bad guys. Sungmin's eyes widened. Bad guys? He straightened up, puffing out his narrow chest. What kind of bad guys? The kind who think they can control me, Kimberly said, keeping her tone light even though the words tasted bitter. People from my past who won't leave me alone. Sungmin's face grew serious, like he was thinking very hard about something important. Then, suddenly, his expression brightened. Then you need protection, he declared. Like in my books. The wife always has a husband who can scare everyone away. Kimberly covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. A husband, huh? And where am I supposed to find one of those at 2 a.m? Me. Sungmin exclaimed, pointing at himself with both thumbs. I'll be your husband. You're my wife now. She couldn't help it, she burst out laughing, the sound echoing softly through the empty corridor. I'm your wife. Just like that? Yes. He nodded enthusiastically, then his face grew more solemn. Wait, let me do it right. He cleared his throat and stood up straight. You're my wife now, miss. He paused, then corrected himself. I mean, you're going to be my wife. That's better. Kimberly's heart melted. She reached out and gently ruffled his hair. Why should I be your wife, little prince? Sungmin thought hard, his brow furrowing. Because I'll protect you. And my daddy has a lot of power. Like, a lot. He can make the bad guys go away forever. He leaned in and whispered conspiratorially, he can make anyone disappear. The way he said it, so innocent, yet so matter-of-fact, sent a small chill down Kimberly's spine. But she pushed the feeling aside. He was just a kid with an active imagination. Okay, she said, playing along. If I'm your wife, will you promise to keep the bad guys away? I promise. Sungmin hooked his tiny pinky around hers with utmost seriousness. Deal, Kimberly said, smiling. Then I guess I'm your wife now. Yes. Sungmin bounced on his toes. You're going to love living with us. We have a really big house. And I'll share my toys. And Daddy will make sure nobody hurts you ever again. That's what husbands do, they protect their wives. The elevator doors at the end of the hallway slid open with a soft chime. The air in the corridor changed instantly, like all the warmth had been sucked out. Kimberly felt it before she saw anything, a sudden, overwhelming presence. 3 men stepped out. No, emerged, like shadows taking form. All wore identical black suits, perfectly tailored, moving with the kind of silent coordination that screamed dangerous. 2 of them flanked the elevator, hands clasped in front of them, eyes scanning the hallway with military precision. But it was the man in the center who made Kimberly's breath catch. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a build that suggested controlled power beneath the expensive fabric of his all-black suit. His black shirt was buttoned to the collar, no tie, giving him an almost priestly severity. His face was carved from marble, sharp jawline, high cheekbones, eyes so dark they looked black in the chandelier light. His expression was utterly unreadable, cold and still as deep water. He moved down the hallway with slow, deliberate steps, and every instinct Kimberly had screamed run. Sungmin gasped and grabbed her hand. That's my daddy. Kimberly's stomach dropped. The man. Minsu, though she didn't know his name yet, stopped 10 feet away. His gaze swept over the scene, his son clutching the hand of a janitor, the cleaning cart abandoned nearby, the white cloth still in Kimberly's grip. When his eyes landed on her, she felt it like a physical weight. Assessing. Calculating. Dangerous. Sungmin, he said, his voice low and controlled, with an edge that could cut glass. What are you doing here? Sungmin beamed, completely unbothered by his father's tone. "Daddy. This is Kimberly. She's my wife." The word landed like a grenade in the silent hallway. Minsu's gaze snapped back to Kimberly. For a heartbeat, something flickered in those dark eyes, surprise, maybe, or calculation, before the mask slid back into place. Kimberly felt her pulse hammering in her throat. She opened her mouth to explain, to apologize, to say anything. But Minsu spoke first, his attention still locked on her. "Are you hurt?" The question threw her. No. I'm fine." "Good." He looked down at his son. "Sung-min, you know you're not supposed to leave the executive floor without security." "I know, but I heard Miss Kimberly, and I wanted to help her." Sung-min tugged on Kimberly's hand. "She has bad guys chasing her, Daddy. We have to protect her. I told her she's my wife now, and she said yes." One of the bodyguards shifted slightly, and Kimberly caught the hint of a weapon holster beneath his jacket. Minsu's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is that so?" Kimberly found her voice. "It was just, he's a kid. We were joking. I didn't. My son doesn't joke about promises." Minsu's tone was flat, final. The air felt too thin suddenly. Kimberly's grip tightened on the cleaning cloth. "Look, I don't know who you are, but..." "He's the boss of everything," one of the bodyguards said quietly from behind them, breaking the silence. His voice was respectful, reverent even. "Song Minsu. Head of the Song Corporation." Kimberly's blood ran cold. She'd heard whispers about the Song family in the 3 months she'd worked here. Rumors exchanged in hushed tones in the break room. A corporation so powerful it controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. A man so feared that even saying his name too loudly was considered dangerous. And she'd just agreed to be his son's wife as a joke. Minsu's gaze hadn't left her face. "Your name," he said. Not a question. A command. "Kimberly," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Kimberly June." "American." "Yes." "How long have you worked here?" 3 months. He nodded once, a sharp, economical movement. Then he extended his hand toward her, not demanding, but offering. "Come. It's safer if you're not alone tonight." Kimberly hesitated. Every survival instinct she'd honed over the past 2 years screamed at her to refuse, to run, to disappear before this man dug into her past and found all the reasons she was here in the first place. But Sung-min was still holding her hand, looking up at her with those hopeful eyes, and something in Minsu's expression, something almost vulnerable beneath the marble exterior, made her pause. "Please," Sung-min whispered. "You promised." She looked down at the boy, then back at the man who could apparently make people disappear. Slowly, she took Minsu's hand. His skin was warm. His grip was steady, surprisingly gentle. They walked toward the elevator in silence, Sung-min between them, one small hand in each of theirs. The bodyguards followed like shadows. The ride down was quiet except for Sung-min's chatter about his toy collection and the garden where fireflies came out at night. Kimberly caught Minsu watching her in the reflection of the polished elevator doors. His expression was unreadable, but there was something calculating in the way his gaze lingered on the faded bruise on her forearm. The one she thought she'd hidden beneath her sleeve. The black limousine waiting outside was longer than any car Kimberly had ever seen. The driver opened the door without a word. Sung-min scrambled in first, patting the leather seat beside him. "Come on, Kimberly. It's really comfy." She slid in, heart hammering. Minsu followed, settling across from them with the same controlled grace he'd shown in the hallway. The door closed with a soft, expensive click, sealing them in a cocoon of leather and luxury. The city lights began to slide past the tinted windows. "Where do you live?" Minsu asked quietly. Kimberly gave the address automatically, a cramped studio in one of Seoul's cheapest neighborhoods, 40 minutes by subway. Minsu nodded to the driver through the partition. The car pulled smoothly into late-night traffic. Sungmin yawned, leaning against Kimberly's side. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into soft snores. She looked down at him, this small boy who'd called her his wife, who'd promised to protect her with the certainty only children possessed. Her chest ached with something she couldn't name. "He's attached to you already," Minsa said quietly. "That doesn't happen often." "He's a sweet kid," Kimberly whispered, not wanting to wake him. "He's sick." Minsu's voice was flat, clinical, but something flickered in his eyes. "Hypoplastic left heart syndrome. He's been on the transplant list for 8 months. The doctors say his window is narrowing." Kimberly felt the floor tilt beneath her, even though they were sitting. "That's why he hates doctors. He thinks if he's brave enough, strong enough, he won't need them." Minsa looked at his son, and for a moment, the marble mask cracked. "But he does. And I can't," he stopped, jaw working. "I can't give him what he needs. Only time can. And time is running out." The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the cold, dangerous man from the hallway. This was a father watching his son die, powerless despite all his wealth and influence. "He likes you," Minsu continued, gaze lifting back to her face. "You make him laugh. You make him forget, even for a few minutes. That's a gift I can't buy." Kimberly's throat tightened. "I was just being kind. Kindness is rare in my world." The car glided through Seoul's glittering streets, past neon signs and late-night restaurants, toward neighborhoods where the buildings grew shorter and the paint peeled at the edges. When they finally pulled up outside her apartment building, a rundown complex with rusted balconies and flickering streetlights, the contrast was stark. One of the bodyguards opened her door. Kimberly carefully shifted Sungmin's weight off her shoulder and slid out. Minsa followed, standing on the cracked sidewalk like a king surveying conquered territory. "This is where you live," he said. Not a question. "Yes." He looked up at the building, then back at her. His expression was unreadable again, but his next words were careful, measured. "You're running from something." Kimberly stiffened. "That's none of your business." "It is now. My son has claimed you. That makes you my responsibility." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Tell me who hurt you, and I'll make sure they never do again." The offer was so matter-of-fact, so certain, that for a moment Kimberly believed he could do it. Make her past disappear with a phone call, a word, a nod. But she'd learned the hard way that protection always came with a price. "I don't need rescuing," she said, lifting her chin. "I'm not offering rescue. I'm offering a deal." "What kind of deal?" Minsu was silent for a long moment, gaze sweeping over her face like he was reading a contract written in her expressions. "Move into my home. Spend time with Sungmin. Keep him happy for however long," his voice caught, barely, but she heard it. "For however long he has left. In return, my security handles anyone from your past. Permanently. No questions asked." Kimberly's heart pounded. "Why? You don't even know me." "Because he smiled more in 5 minutes with you than he has in 5 months with a dozen nannies and therapists." Minsu's jaw tightened. "And because I've spent the last year building walls around him to keep him safe, but what he needs isn't safety. He needs someone who sees him as a boy, not a patient. Someone who plays along when he declares them his wife instead of explaining why that's impossible." The words hung between them, weighted with desperation masked as pragmatism. Kimberly looked back at the limousine, where Sungmin slept against the window, small and fragile and running out of time. Then she looked at her apartment building, at the place she'd been hiding for 3 months, always looking over her shoulder, always one step ahead of the past that hunted her. "No strings?" she asked quietly. "One string. You stay until he doesn't need you anymore." "And when that happens?" Minsu's expression was carved from stone again. "Then you walk away with whatever you need to start over. Clean slate." New identity if you want it. Enough money that you'll never have to hide again. It was too much. Too good. Too dangerous. But when she opened her mouth to refuse, she thought of Sungmin's laugh echoing in that empty corridor. The way he'd wiped his tears and declared her his wife with such absolute certainty, like he could will it into being true. One condition, Kimberly said. Mintz raised an eyebrow. I'm not your charity case. I work. Even if it's just helping around the house or reading to Sungmin. I don't take handouts. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Deal. He extended his hand. She took it. His grip was warm again, steady, sealing a bargain she didn't fully understand yet. 3 days later, Kimberly moved into the Song mansion with one duffel bag and a growing sense that she'd made either the best or worst decision of her life. The house, no, estate. Sat in Hanam-dong, Seoul's most exclusive neighborhood, behind high walls and security cameras that tracked her every step from the gate to the front door. It looked more like a modern fortress than a home, glass and steel and sharp angles, beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. A housekeeper in a crisp uniform showed her to the guest wing. Kimberly had laughed, actually laughed, when she saw the walk-in closet already stocked with clothes in her size. Simple dresses, soft sweaters, jeans that fit like they'd been tailored for her curves. No tags, no receipts, just quiet, expensive thoughtfulness. Mr. Song said you might prefer not to wear your uniform all the time, the woman explained with a polite bow. Kimberly hated how much she liked it. How much she liked the enormous bed with sheets that felt like clouds. The bathroom with its rainfall shower and heated floors. The window that overlooked a garden where, true to Sungmin's promise, fireflies came out at dusk. She found her rhythm quickly. Mornings were breakfast with Sungmin in the sun-filled kitchen while he told elaborate stories about dragons and knights. Afternoons were reading sessions in the library or board games that always ended with him declaring her the best player ever, even when he won. Evenings she retreated to her room, trying not to notice how Mintzu's gaze lingered when their paths crossed in the hallways. He was always working, phone to ear, laptop open, bodyguards trailing like shadows. But when Sungmin called for him, he came immediately. No hesitation. No, I'm busy. Just dropping everything to kneel at his son's level and listen to whatever breathless story the boy needed to share. Tonight, though, the house was too quiet. Sungmin had fallen asleep early after a long day of medical tests that left him pale and exhausted. Kimberly couldn't sleep. She padded barefoot down to the kitchen at 1:17 a.m., craving tea and silence. Mintzu was already there. He stood at the island in a black t-shirt and sweatpants, hair slightly mussed, the first time she'd seen him in anything but a suit. His sleeves were pushed up, revealing corded forearms. A tablet glowed in front of him, but his eyes were on the dark window, unfocused. He didn't startle when she entered. Just glanced over. Couldn't sleep? She shook her head, moving to the kettle. Sungmin's fever earlier scared me. He's tougher than he looks. So are you, she said before she could stop herself. He turned fully toward her. The kitchen island separated them, but the space felt smaller suddenly, charged with something Kimberly couldn't name. She busied herself with the tea, not meeting his eyes. I didn't mean to pry, she said quietly. It's just, you carry everything. The company, him, the waiting. I don't know how you don't break. I break, Mintzu said, voice low. I just do it where no one sees. Kimberly looked up. His gaze held hers, raw, unguarded for once. No marble mask. Just a man who was tired of being strong. My ex-wife left when the diagnosis came, he continued, each word carefully controlled. She said she couldn't handle watching him die. That it would destroy her. So she destroyed us instead and disappeared before he was even out of surgery. Kimberly's fingers tightened around her mug. I'm sorry. I built everything after that. The empire, the walls, the distance between me and anything that could hurt him, or me, again. He stepped around the island, closer. Not touching, but near enough she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the cedar and smoke of his cologne. And then this woman with your smile walks into my son's life and suddenly everything feels fragile again. Her breath caught. I don't have that kind of power. You do. His voice dropped. You make him laugh. You make him forget the needles. You make me remember what it feels like to want something that isn't control. The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Kimberly set down her mug before her hands could shake. Minsa reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a stray curl from her cheek. His thumb lingered against her skin. The touch was barely there, but it burned. She leaned into it without thinking, just a fraction. His eyes darkened. Then his phone buzzed on the counter, sharp and insistent. The spell broke. He cursed under his breath, checking the screen. Sungmin's monitor. They ran. Up the stairs, down the hall, into Sungmin's room where the boy sat up in bed clutching his chest, face flushed, breathing shallow. The heart monitor beeped erratically. Minsa scooped him up without hesitation. I've got you, buddy. Daddy, it hurts, Sungmin whimpered. Kimberly grabbed the emergency oxygen mask, fitting it gently over his face while Minsa carried him toward the door. One of the night security men was already in the hallway. Car's ready, sir. The private hospital wing was 15 minutes away. Doctors swarmed the moment they arrived, all clinical efficiency and murmured medical jargon. Kimberly stood in the waiting area, arms wrapped around herself, watching through the glass as machines beeped and Minsa held his son's hand. An hour later, the lead cardiologist emerged. Fever spike from an infection. We've stabilized him, but the pressure on his heart is increasing. We need a match soon. Weeks, maybe less. Minsa's jaw clenched. How soon? We're doing everything we can, Mr. Song. It wasn't an answer. It was a warning. When they returned to the mansion at dawn, Sungmin was asleep in Minsa's arms, small and fragile and running out of time. Minsa carried him to bed, then turned to Kimberly in the hallway. Thank you, he said simply. She nodded, throat too tight for words. He hesitated, then, there's something else you should know. The media caught wind of you being here. Photos from the tower, rumors about a mystery woman in the Song household. My mother is displeased. Kimberly's stomach twisted. Madame Song. Even someone who'd only been in Seoul for a few months knew that name. Korea's most feared matriarch. She wants you gone, Minsu continued. Says you're a distraction. A liability. Then maybe I should. No. His voice was sharp. Then, softer. I need to ask you something. Another deal. She waited. A temporary engagement. Public announcement. We say it's real. It shuts down the gossip, protects you from scrutiny, gives Sungmin stability. When he's safe, when he has his new heart, we can quietly end it. Fake, Kimberly said slowly. Fake, Minsu confirmed. But his voice was rougher than before, his eyes searching her face like he was looking for something he couldn't name. Unless. He didn't finish. The word hung between them, unspoken but deafening. Kimberly thought about Sungmin's laugh. About the way Minsa looked at her in the kitchen like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. About how she'd stopped feeling like she was hiding and started feeling like she was home. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. 3 days later, the announcement hit every news outlet in Korea. Trillionaire Mafia boss engaged to mystery American janitor. The photos were everywhere. Grainy shots of her entering the mansion, old pictures from her U.S. high school yearbook, speculation about how they met. Comment sections exploded with congratulations and venom in equal measure. Kimberly scrolled through it all in her room, stomach churning, until Minsu appeared in the doorway. Stop looking, he said quietly. I can't. It's everywhere. He crossed the room, took the phone from her hand, set it face down. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, close but not touching. They'll move on to the next story in 48 hours. And until then? Until then, we protect what matters. He nodded toward Sungmin's room down the hall. He's sleeping better tonight because he believes this is real. Because he thinks you're staying. Kimberly looked at the emerald ring Minsu had slipped onto her finger that morning, simple, elegant, Sungmin's birthstone. It feels real, she admitted. Does that scare you? Everything about this scares me. He reached out, traced the edge of the emerald with his thumb. The touch was light, reverent. Then let me be the one who isn't afraid. She met his eyes. The space between them thickened with unspoken words, with want and fear and the knowledge that they were playing a dangerous game where the lines between fake and real were already blurring. Outside, Seoul glittered like a promise. Inside the glass fortress, a woman who'd spent years running had finally stopped. And a man who'd built walls around his heart was discovering they'd never been strong enough to keep her out. The emerald caught the light every time Kimberly moved her hand, sending green fractals dancing across white walls. She'd been wearing it for 3 days now, and she still wasn't used to the weight. Not the physical weight, the ring was delicate, elegant, but the weight of what it represented. A lie that felt more real every time Sungmin called her mom when he thought no one was listening. She stood in the garden watching him chase butterflies with a net, his laughter bright and clear in the afternoon sun. He'd had a good week. No fevers, no chest pains, just a 6-year-old boy being a boy. It was easy to forget, in moments like these, that time was running out. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from behind her, cold, cultured, sharp as a blade wrapped in silk. Kimberly turned to find a woman standing on the stone path, perfectly coiffed in Chanel and pearls. Her eyes were the same dark, unreadable shade as Minsu's, but where his sometimes softened when he looked at Sungmin, hers held nothing but calculation. Madame Song. The ring, the woman continued, stepping closer. My late husband gave me one just like it. Before I discovered he'd bought 3 others for his mistresses. She smiled, thin and cold. Emeralds are such common stones, don't you think? Kimberly straightened her spine. I think they're Sungmin's birthstone. That's what makes them valuable. Ah. Sentiment. Madame Song's gaze swept over her, assessing every detail from Kimberly's simple sundress to her bare feet on the grass. How very American. Tell me, Miss June, what exactly do you think you're doing here? I'm spending time with Sungmin. Your son asked me to. My son is a fool when it comes to matters of the heart. He always has been. She pulled an envelope from her designer purse and held it out. That's why I'm here. To correct his mistake before it costs him everything. Kimberly didn't take the envelope. I'm not interested. You haven't seen what's inside yet. $5 million, American. A new passport, a visa for any country you choose, and a legally binding NDA. All you have to do is leave. Tonight. Before that child gets any more attached to someone who will inevitably disappoint him. The words were designed to wound, and they did. But Kimberly had spent 2 years running from people who thought money could buy anything. She wasn't about to start now. No, she said quietly. Madame Song's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Then perhaps you'll be interested in this. She pulled out a second envelope, this one thicker. Your brother's debts. Loan sharks, forged signatures on documents tying him to one of my competitors. If this information leaks to the authorities, or worse, to the media, it will destroy any credibility you might have gained. Gold digger with a criminal family. The headlines write themselves. Kimberly's hands curled into fists. You leaked my past to them, didn't you? You told them where to find me. I protect this family. Even from itself. Madame Song stepped closer, voice dropping. My grandson is dying. The last thing he needs is the distraction of a gold-digging foreigner who. That's enough. Minsu's voice cut through the garden like a blade. He stood in the doorway, still in his suit from whatever meeting he'd just left, but his tie was loosened, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, 2 bodyguards materialized like shadows. Wu Bin, be reasonable. Leave. Now. Madame Song's jaw tightened. I'm your mother. And she's my fiancée. He walked to Kimberly's side, close enough that their shoulders touched. You come near her again, near my home, near my son, and I'll do what I should have done years ago. Cut you off completely. The board votes, the trust fund access, the apartment in Gangnam, all of it. Gone. For the first time, Madame Song's composure cracked. You would choose her over your own blood? I already have. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Then Madame Song smiled, but it was the smile of a snake before it struck. You'll regret this, she said softly. She turned and walked away, heels clicking against stone, leaving the envelopes on the garden bench like discarded weapons. Kimberly exhaled shakily. Minsu's hand found hers, fingers threading through hers, solid and warm. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You didn't do anything wrong. I brought you into this. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I made you a target. She looked up at him. In the afternoon light, he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight with tension. But his eyes, when they met hers, were soft. Vulnerable. I chose to stay, Kimberly said. Even when you gave me an out, I stayed. That's on me. Why? His voice was rough. Why stay when anyone sane would run? She looked over at Sung Min, still chasing butterflies, still laughing. Because he makes me remember what it feels like to have something worth protecting. And because you, she stopped, the words catching in her throat. Because I what? Because you make me feel like I'm not hiding anymore. Like I can stop running. Minsu's jaw worked. Then he pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her in a way that felt less like an embrace and more like a promise. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in cedar and smoke, letting herself have this moment before the world demanded they keep pretending. Daddy. Kimberly. Look. Sung Min ran toward them, net clutched in both hands, grinning so wide it hurt to see. I caught one. I caught a butterfly. They pulled apart, but not far. Minsu's hand stayed on her lower back as they walked over to admire Sungmin's prize, a small monarch butterfly that fluttered against the mesh, delicate and temporary and perfect. You have to let it go now, Kimberly said gently. Beautiful things aren't meant to be caged. Sungmin looked up at her with those serious, too old eyes. Even if I want to keep them forever? Especially then. He thought about it, then carefully opened the net. The butterfly circled once, twice, then disappeared into the sky. Sungmin watched it go, then grabbed both their hands. Can we have pizza for dinner? He asked. The kind with extra cheese? Minsu laughed, a real laugh, rare and genuine. Whatever you want, buddy. That night, after pizza and a movie and tucking Sungmin into bed, Kimberly stood in her room staring at the envelopes Madame Song had left. She should burn them. Throw them away. But instead, she opened them. The money didn't surprise her. The passport, the visa, those were just tools. But the documents about her brother made her sick. Pages and pages of debt, of schemes, of him selling information about her to Minsu's competitors. Her own blood, trying to profit from her pain. A soft knock at the door. Minsu entered without waiting for permission, still dressed but barefoot, hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. You opened them, he said, looking at the papers spread across her bed. I needed to know. He sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. I have people handling it. Your brother won't touch you again. None of them will. Why do you care? The question came out sharper than she meant. I'm just the hired help. The fake fiancé who keeps your son happy. Minsa turned to face her fully. Is that really what you think this is? I don't know what this is anymore. He reached up, cupped her face with both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. It stopped being fake the moment you stayed after my mother offered you $5 million to leave. It stopped being fake when you held my son through his fever and sang to him like he was yours. It stopped being fake, his voice cracked. It stopped being fake when I realized I'd rather lose everything than lose you. Kimberly's breath caught. Minsu. He kissed her. Slow, deep, tasting of desperation and promise. She melted into it, fingers threading through his hair, pulling him closer until there was no space between them. When they broke apart, breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. Stay, he whispered. Not for some men. Not for protection. Stay because you want to. I want to, she whispered back. God help me, I want to. They didn't make it any further that night. Didn't need to. They lay together on her bed, fully clothed, wrapped in each other's arms until dawn crept through the windows. It was enough. But dawn brought a phone call that shattered everything. 4:42 a.m. Minsu's phone shrilled from the nightstand. He answered it before the second ring, voice instantly alert. What? Kimberly watched his face drain of color. No, he said. Just that one word, flat and final. Then, how? He listened, jaw clenching tighter with each passing second. When he finally hung up, he just sat there, staring at nothing. Minsu? Kimberly touched his shoulder. What happened? The donor heart. The one they found last week, the perfect match. His voice was hollow. The family rejected it. Paperwork issues. Forged signatures on the consent form. What? How is that possible? My mother. He said it like a curse. She has connections everywhere. She convinced them the recipient's environment was unstable. That Sungmin would be better off waiting for another match. Kimberly felt ice in her veins. She sabotaged her own grandson's chance? She thinks if he stays sick long enough, I'll see reason. Marry someone appropriate. Someone who won't threaten the family name. He stood abruptly, pacing. She's killing him to prove a point. Down the hall, a monitor alarm started beeping. Sharp, insistent. They ran. Sungmin was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest, eyes wide with terror. Daddy, he gasped. It hurts. It really hurts. The next hours were chaos. Ambulance screaming through pre-dawn Seoul. Doctors swarming. Monitors shrieking. Sungmin's small body hooked up to machines that did the work his failing heart couldn't. We can stabilize him, the lead cardiologist said, voice grim. But without a transplant soon, days, not weeks, we'll lose him. Minsa looked like he'd been carved from stone again, all emotion locked down, but his hands shook when he held his son's tiny one. Then his phone rang. A Tokyo number. Song-san, a heavily accented voice said. We have donor. Motorcycle accident, young man, brain dead. Heart is perfect match. But you must come now. Weather window closing. Storm coming. Minsu's eyes met Kimberly's. How soon? Helicopter to airport, private jet to Busan. Donor arrives in 4 hours. Surgery must begin in 6. We'll be there. They transferred Sungmin to a medical helicopter. Kimberly climbed in beside him, holding his hand while a nurse managed the oxygen. Minsu sat across from them, phone to his ear, coordinating with his pilot, his security team, the hospital in Busan. The jet was waiting when they landed. Smaller than Kimberly expected, more cramped. Sungmin was strapped into a medical gurney, barely conscious. The engines roared to life as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and threatening. Visibility dropping fast, the pilot reported. We're going to hit turbulence. Just fly, Minsu said. They did. And it was hell. The plane bucked and shuddered through storm clouds that turned day to night. Lightning forked across the windows. Sungmin's monitor beeped erratically, his breathing shallow and fast despite the oxygen mask. Kimberly held his hand, singing the lullaby her mother used to sing, trying to keep her voice steady even as her stomach lurched. Halfway through the flight, her phone buzzed. Security team. Ma'am, we have a situation. Your brother attempted to breach the mansion perimeter. He was armed. Had restraints, a ransom note. He's in custody, but he mentioned Li Tang, Minsu's biggest competitor. They were planning to use you as leverage during the surgery. Kimberly closed her eyes. Even now. Even while Sungmin was dying, the vultures were circling. Tell the police everything, she said. No deals. Minsu looked at her, questions in his eyes. She shook her head. Later. If there was a later. The landing in Busan was rough, tires screeching, rain hammering the fuselage. An ambulance waited, lights flashing. They transferred Sungmin directly to the surgical wing, running through corridors that Kimberly recognized from her previous life. Service tunnels branching off every main hallway. Maintenance access points. Loading docks. She'd worked as a janitor in this hospital once, years ago, before Seoul. Before running. She knew every shortcut, every hidden passage. The surgery began at 2:47 p.m. Donor heart arrived by helicopter, packed in ice, precious and fragile. Kimberly and Minsu sat in the sterile waiting room, not touching but close, both too scared to speak. Then, at 4:15, the lights went out. Emergency backup kicked in, bathing everything in red. An alarm shrilled. Security radio chattered. Breach on floor 3. Multiple armed suspects. Lockdown protocol initiated. Minsu was on his feet instantly. Where's my son? Surgery is continuing, sir. But you need to evacuate. I'm not leaving him. Gunfire echoed from somewhere above them. Shouts. The sound of breaking glass. Kimberly grabbed Minsu's arm. I know this building. I worked here. There are service tunnels that connect to the surgical floor. We can get to Sungmin. You worked here? Long story. Come on. She ran, and he followed, bodyguards forming a protective circle around them. Down one corridor, through a maintenance door marked staff only, into a narrow passage lined with pipes and electrical conduit. The air smelled like antiseptic and rust. Above them, more gunfire. Closer now. Who's attacking us? Kimberly asked, breathless. Li Tang. He knew we'd be vulnerable during the surgery. He's been trying to take over my medical division for years. With me dead and Sungmin, Minsu's voice broke. With Sungmin gone, there'd be no air. No one to fight him. They reached a junction. Kimberly paused, getting her bearings. Left led to the loading dock. Right led up, toward the surgical floors. Behind them, voices echoed, Korean, sharp with orders. There in the tunnels, one of Minsu's bodyguards said quietly. We need to split up. Draw them away. No, Kimberly said. We go up. Together. There's a maintenance access that opens directly into the surgical wing. Staff only, biometric lock, but I bet your clearance works. Why would my clearance work? Because you practically own this hospital. Minsu almost smiled. Almost. They climbed. The ladder was steep, narrow, claustrophobic. Kimberly went first, then Minsu, then the guards. At the top was a door marked authorized personnel only. Minsu pressed his thumb to the scanner. It beeped green. They emerged into a storage room filled with medical supplies. Through the door, they could hear the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the quiet murmur of surgical staff working. Sung Min was on the other side of that wall, on an operating table, heart stopped while surgeons fitted him with a new one. A bodyguard checked the hallway. Clear. But we need to move. They'll figure out where we went. They slipped into the corridor. Minsu headed straight for the observation window above the surgical suite. Kimberly followed. Below them, in the harsh white light, they could see Sungmin's small form draped in blue surgical sheets. The donor heart sat in a cooler beside the table, pink and perfect. Surgeons worked with quiet efficiency, every movement precise. He's stable, Minsu whispered. He's going to make it. That's when the door at the end of the hall burst open. 3 men in black tactical gear, faces covered, weapons raised. Li Tang's people. The bodyguards moved instantly, putting themselves between the gunman and Minsu. Shots fired. One guard went down. The other returned fire, forcing the attackers back behind a corner. Get him to the panic room, the remaining guard shouted. Now. But Minsu didn't move. His eyes were locked on the surgical theater below, where doctors were looking up in alarm at the sounds of gunfire. If they stopped the surgery now, if they had to close Sung Min up before finishing? I'm not leaving my son, Minsu said. Kimberly grabbed his hand. Then we hold them here. Together. The guard looked at them like they were insane. Maybe they were. But Kimberly knew these hallways. Knew where the emergency lockdown switches were. Knew how to seal sections of the hospital to contain threats. There, she pointed to a panel on the wall. Red switch. It locks down this entire wing. They'll be trapped on the other side. The guard ran for it. Hit the switch. Steel doors began to descend from the ceiling at every corridor intersection, dividing the floor into secure zones. The gunman realized too late, running forward, but the door came down between them with a final, decisive slam. Silence. Below, the surgery continued. A nurse looked up at the observation window, saw them standing there, and gave a thumbs up. All clear. They're almost done. Kimberly's knees buckled. Minsu caught her, holding her up, both of them shaking with adrenaline and relief. You saved him, he whispered against her hair. You saved us both. We saved him, she corrected. Together. They stood there, watching through glass as surgeons completed the final sutures. Watching as the new heart, Sungmin's new heart, began to beat on its own. Strong. Steady. Perfect. 3 weeks later, Sungmin walked slowly down the hospital corridor, one small hand in Kimberly's, the other in Minsu's. No oxygen tank. No 4-pull. Just a boy taking careful steps, testing his new heart with wonder. I'm taller, he announced, grinning up at them. You're definitely growing, Kimberly agreed, laughing. Back at the mansion, everything had changed. Madame Song had retreated to Jeju Island after her role in the forged donor documents came to light. Li Tang was in custody, facing charges of attempted murder and corporate espionage. Kimberly's brother had been deported, his debt settled in exchange for testimony against Tang's organization. The vultures had scattered. The fortress was quiet again. That evening, after Sungmin had gone to bed early, still recovering, still needing rest, Minsu led Kimberly to the formal living room. It had been transformed. Fairy lights strung across the ceiling. A small table set for 3. Candles everywhere. What is this? She asked. Open it. He handed her a velvet box. Inside was a thin platinum chain with 3 pendants. 1 emerald, Sungmin's birthstone. 1 small diamond, her birth month. 1 black onyx, Minsu's. Simple. Interlocking. Perfect. We're already a family, Minsu said quietly. But I want to make it official. Not fake. Not temporary. Real. He dropped to one knee right there in the candlelight, vulnerable and certain, eyes locked on hers. Kimberly June, you walked into my son's life and called yourself his wife as a joke. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being funny and started being true. You saved him. You saved me. I don't want a contract or a deal. I want forever, messy and complicated, with hospital scares and late-night conversations and fireflies in the garden. Will you marry me? For real this time? Tears slipped down her cheeks. Behind them, Sungmin peeked around the doorway in his pajamas, grinning. Say yes, he whispered loudly. You promised. Kimberly laughed through the tears. Yes. For real this time. Yes. Minsu exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. He rose, slipped the chain around her neck, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like salt and promise and coming home. Sungmin cheered, running to them, throwing his arms around both their legs. Family hug, he declared. They sank to the floor together, the three of them tangled in each other's arms, laughing and crying and whole. Outside, Seoul glittered with possibility. Inside the glass fortress that was no longer a fortress but a home, a woman who'd spent years running had finally found a place to stay. And a man who'd built walls around his heart had learned that the best things in life couldn't be caged, they had to be chosen, every day, over and over again. 3 pendants. 3 hearts. 1 family. Forged not by blood, but by choice.